Okay, welcome everybody. We're just seeing if you can see our screen.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
showing. Okay, great.
Seems to be showing.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to the EOCA webinar. My name is Catherine Savage, and this is my colleague, Kat Barker. Together, we thought it would be useful to provide this webinar for organisations looking to apply to EOCA for project funding, to explain the application process, to run through our funding criteria, and then open up the meeting for any questions you may have about the process. So we very much hope that you'll find it a useful event today. As I hope you will have noticed when you joined the webinar, it is being recorded and we hope to share it after the event on our website. This may display your name, so please only stay if you're happy with that. We will now run through a presentation about EOCA, its funding application process and funding criteria, and then open the meeting up for questions, which you can submit through the chat function at any point of the meeting. Okay, so by way of a quick introduction to the European Outdoor Conservation Association, EOCA. EOCA is a non-profit association which raises funds from and with the European outdoor leisure sector to conserve and protect wild landscapes around the world. We currently have 146 members and partners who you can see on this list here. EOCA raises funds through membership fees, which our members pay, and also through fundraising activities and donations. Since the association was started in 2006, we have committed around €5.6 million into nearly 200 conservation projects in 65 different countries around the world.
EOCA funds a broad range of conservation projects around the world, but all projects must protect and restore threatened habitats and mitigate against climate change and the loss of biodiversity. We fund conservation of habitats and species in wild places, by which we mean non-urban environments and ecosystems that occur in as natural a state as possible, given the area's location and use. So, what does our funding application process look like? And what are the timings of the process through the year? Well, we have 2 funding rounds every year. You should always keep an eye on our website and social media for details of the exact timings and what we're looking for each funding round, as these can vary slightly. We're open to applications from not-for-profit organisations carrying out work anywhere in the world except for in the USA and Canada. That's because there is a similar organisation called the Conservation Alliance, which does work there. And not-for-profits can apply for up to 30,000 for a project, and projects tend to last 1 to 2 years.
As Kat said, we have 2 funding rounds each year, and each funding round lasts about 5 to 6 months from application to funding becoming available. The timing may vary slightly each year depending on the number of applications we receive and other events that EOCA is organising, but this will be communicated each year. So for this autumn 2024 funding round then, organisations can apply to us for funding during the month of June. We will then aim to go through all the applications to assess them against our funding criteria and create a shortlist by the end of September or into October, depending on the number of applications we receive. We will then hold votes in October, November time to select which projects from the shortlist will receive funding, and I'll talk a bit more about the voting later on. And then funding will become available in November to the successful projects. In November, we will then open for applications for funding in our Spring 2025 funding round. In recent years, we have asked for a concept note, first of all, before requesting full applications from a shortlist of these applicants. This time round, we're actually asking for the full application straight away in June. It is really important, therefore, that applicants read through our criteria very carefully to ensure that their projects meet them before investing all the time that a full application takes to complete. The form, along with a predicted project impact document, can be downloaded from our website on the Apply for Funding page. Once we have all the applications, we score each project based on our criteria, and from that, we will create a short list of 15 to 20 projects which best meet our criteria. So I'll now take you through these funding criteria.
Okay, so firstly, the project should protect, enhance, or restore a threatened landscape, habitat, or species. So you need to describe to us in your application what the habitat that you plan to work in is like, what the threats to it are, and how the project will be addressing these threats. How will the habitat be protected, enhanced, or restored? A point to note here when applying to EOCA is that there must be some hands-on conservation work involved. Otherwise, your project will not progress. Research, planning, engagement meetings, data collection, information campaigns are all very important elements of a project, but they are not what we think of as hands-on conservation work. These elements can be included in your project, but a significant amount of our funding must be for the hands-on element of your project. So hands-on conservation means getting your hands dirty. This could be planting trees, removing invasive species, re-wetting bogs or peatland, removing plastic pollution, coral reef restoration, or removing snares, for example. Secondly, the project must have a link to the outdoor enthusiast to make it relevant to EOCA members that are providing the funding for these projects. This means the area you're working in needs to hold interest for people who like to visit the outdoors, such as climbers, walkers, bikers, kayakers, etc. Or people who simply like to be in nature, or that a species you are working to conserve is one that nature lovers or bird watchers would love to come to your area to try to see. So tell us in your application who currently visits the area and what you are planning to do as part of your project to engage with them. How will you enhance their experience? How will you educate and engage them as part of your project? If no one ever visits your area, or if it is so remote or heavily protected that no one is allowed to go there, then this is not something EOCA can fund. If you're looking to increase visitors to the area, then that's okay, as long as there are already some there and that you have the capacity to bring them in a more sustainable manner. So we look at how projects score on these first two criteria before deciding whether or not to take them further in the application process. So it's really important to look at whether your project meets these two criteria before applying. It is also important to get the balance right. Your project must meet the needs of the outdoor enthusiast, but the main focus of the work that EOCA funds should be primarily the conservation work. EOCA will not fund projects that are purely about accommodating outdoor enthusiasts without any actions which protect, enhance, or restore the habitat.
So once a project gets through this first stage, we then assess it against a number of other criteria. Firstly, does it address the root cause of the threat to the habitat or species? Is it addressing the specific issues? So for this criteria, we look at what you list as the threats to the habitat and species and want to see that you are addressing these threats and their root causes in your project proposal. For example, are you addressing the reasons why there is human-wildlife conflict in the area, perhaps by enhancing habitat, food or water sources for the wildlife away from where they come into conflict with people? Are you addressing the cause of deforestation as well as restoring it? The next criteria is involving the local community. A project has no hope of success without the support and engagement of the local community in and alongside the project area. All EOCA funded projects must work with local communities So tell us how your project will benefit these communities, encourage local stewardship of local landscapes, help tackle poverty, and support local ecosystem services such as providing clean water or preventing erosion, flooding, or wildfires, and providing a safer, healthier environment for communities to thrive in. We look for organisations that already have good relationships and support within communities in their project area. If there are Indigenous communities in the project area, we need to know how they're involved in the project and how their needs are being met. Although all projects we fund must involve and engage with local communities, the projects must still be primarily conservation projects rather than social projects. We will not fund projects that are primarily social projects, addressing issues such as setting up waste management systems or agricultural projects, for example. A project also needs to have an educational or training element. Tell us if you're providing education and raising awareness of the importance of the species or habitat you are working in to conserve, or the negative impacts of certain actions and how to do things differently, or teaching skills that will develop new alternative livelihoods. We also assess applications on the following criteria. Does the project leave a positive legacy? What will happen when EOCA funding finishes? We look for projects where the funded organisations will stay involved in the project, or that the work it has started, including education and training carried out, and the support and agreement of the local community will mean that the work will continue to grow and expand long after the funding from EOCA has finished. Climate mitigation, as explained earlier, mitigating against climate change is a vital aspect of any project. So tell us about how your project restores or conserves a habitat that stores or sequesters carbon. Mitigating against biodiversity loss is also a vital aspect of the projects we support. Please tell us about the important biodiversity in your project area and how your project will protect or restore it and enable it to thrive. And wow factor. Extra points are available here for an inspiring project that perhaps does things a bit differently or tries a new concept, or simply a truly holistic project that will make a real difference to a truly special habitat, landscape and community. We get so many applications, over 250 in the last funding round alone. How is yours different from all of the others? How is a grant from EOCA going to make a real, tangible and exciting difference to the issues the area is facing?
Okay, finally, objectives. Our application asks for 3 measurable and time-orientated objectives. These are vital because we use them to get an overall summary of what you're trying to achieve through the work you want to do. And if your project goes on to receive a grant from EOCA, each time you send us a report, we will look at those objectives to see how far you've come in achieving what you set out to do. So this means we are looking for numbers and dates. So for example, we will run 3 training events with 6 women's groups on caring for tree seedlings during March, April and May, or 300,000 seedlings will be planted over an area of 200 hectares of degraded land from June to September during each year of the 2-year project, using 200 local volunteers and 6 local schools. So these would be measurable. Examples of objectives that are not measurable would be, for example, raise awareness on climate change amongst visitors, or collect data to increase the protection of the area. Neither of these says to us how it's going to be done, how it's going to be achieved, how you will know whether or not it has been successful, or when it is actually going to happen. So once we have scored all the projects, we create a short list of the projects that best meet EOCA's criteria and which we would be happy to fund. We then ask our scientific advisors to review our decisions at this point. They are all experts in various different areas of conservation, and they provide valuable advice, comment, and additional questions to us at this stage in the process. They're extremely useful panel for us and provide expert advice on the broad range of projects that EOCA receives applications on.
So once we have a confirmed shortlist of projects that we would be happy to fund, the projects that actually receive the funding are selected in 3 different ways: a public vote, a members' vote, and then potentially by individual members. So during the public vote, each project in the shortlist is presented online, and the general public, outdoor enthusiasts, nature lovers, and the project's own supporters can go onto our website and vote for their favourite projects. The public vote is 2 weeks of relatively hard work for the organisations in the vote, and we do appreciate the efforts that they put in. But all the projects we work with in this way come back to us to say how useful and worthwhile it is, helping to raise the profile of their organisation and gaining support in unusual places. The President of Costa Rica, a politician in the UK, Miss Nepal, and even David Attenborough have shown their support for projects in our vote over the years. It's also a very useful way of raising awareness for your project locally and to build up extra support for it with the local community. We've been astounded by the tens of thousands of votes we have received, as well as the millions of people that have been reached during the voting periods over the years. Following the public vote, the projects with the most votes will gain funding, and the remaining projects will be put to a vote with our EOCA members. This is a private vote and will enable our members to select further projects for funding. And then finally, the remaining shortlist will be sent to all EOCA members to see if any of them are interested in supporting any of the projects themselves through EOCA. We have a number of companies that support whole projects through EOCA, so we pass on the remaining shortlist to see if any of those projects hold particular interest to any of our members. Selected projects will receive 50% of their funding when they start their project, 30% on receipt of an acceptable interim report about halfway through the project, and 20% on completion of their project and submission of an acceptable final report and financial statement. As we said at the start, please do always check our website for details of exactly what we're looking for in each project funding round, as it can change slightly. For this round, we are encouraging funding applications for restoration projects, and in particular, mountain restoration. This is partly to tie in with the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, and also the UN Environment Programme's theme of mountain restoration in the lead up to COP16 in October. Projects will still need to meet all of our funding criteria, which we've just been through, and we are still accepting applications for projects protecting and restoring all different types of habitats. So this isn't a change from the projects we usually fund. It's just a call to encourage applications for restoration projects, and in particular, those in mountain settings. And finally, some top tips. Firstly, before you fill in your application this month, please make sure you meet all of our funding criteria. Because we receive so many applications, yours will not progress if it does not fit our criteria, and a lot of your time will be needed to submit the application for it to not then progress. Make sure you grab our attention in your application. How does yours stand out from the others? Describe clearly the habitats and species and the actions you plan to take to protect and restore them. Tell us about the local community and outdoor enthusiasts and how you're going to engage with them. Send us a few photographs to illustrate your points, or even a short video, so we can get a really good sense of the area you're working in. Remember to send all the additional documentation that we ask for with the application. And please stick to the word count. We're a small team of part-time staff, and so we have a finite amount of time to assess all project applications we receive. So we very much appreciate project applications that are succinct and clearly lay out all of the important information. If you progress to the public vote, be aware that this will require some additional work from your organisation to rally support for your project. But please also see it as an opportunity to raise awareness of the great work you're doing and the issues that you are addressing. And finally, we very much look forward to receiving and reading your applications. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us today. It's been great to have the opportunity to speak to so many of you. So we'd now like to open the webinar up for questions. So if you could please put any questions you have in the chat and we will work our way through them. Just bear with us while we work out the technicalities of actually doing that. Go. So we'll go to the top of the chat then and we'll work our way down. Okay, so the first question, can teaching citizens and tourists how to prevent and to manage encounters with a bear in a national park or natural park be considered hands-on? I think that would come under our criteria of education and raising awareness. Hands-on, as Kat explained, is about getting your hands dirty, taking out invasive species, planting trees. So I think that would be education.
Next question, which is on habitat other than mountains, coastal habitat. Definitely, we are accepting proposals for all habitats. So yes, definitely, that's absolutely fine to send in a proposal on coastal habitat.
It's the same question from Ecuador as well. Yeah, we're particularly keen to see applications from mountains and restoration projects in mountains, but we are accepting applications from all habitats.
And then the next one is that about elaborate on timeline budget planning. So yeah, we get projects for usually it's typically 1 or 2 year projects. When we in the past when we've done cleanup operations, they can be a bit shorter, but we don't just focus on those now. So we do tend to have 1 to 2 year projects. Not sure if you're wanting any more explanation on that, but just outline your budget for how you would do it over that 1 year or 2 years. Does that answer that question? Yes, it can definitely be planned for 1 year. We do get quite a lot of projects that are just for 1 year. No problem. We like the timeline in a nice, clear one-page format, so not over a whole load of pages. It varies from project to project because we have such a variety of projects, so we don't have any specific format. Just try and make it nice and clear with the months or the weeks that you're doing over the 1 year or 2 years, and then highlighting what is being done in each of those.
So can a 1 or 2 year project be part of a wider project that would be longer in duration? Yes, it can be. Our funds can be used to part fund projects, but please just make that clear in your application. What are the funds you need for the project to go ahead? If you've got applications pending or if you've already got funding from other sources, just make that clear to us. And any sort of implications of not getting the additional funding that you need, would that mean the project can't go ahead or can go ahead for a shorter period of time? If you can just explain that in the application, that's all fine.
Okay, a question on bee conservation and restoration work in bee habitats. Ecotourism activities where people experience beekeeping and understanding the importance of bees. That's fine. It doesn't matter that you're not in a mountain. Just be aware that we wouldn't typically fund something that was solely on beekeeping. You mentioned there that restoration work. So if you're restoring habitats for bee species of importance in the area, then yes, that's great. Absolutely fine.
Okay, so there's a question about a newly declared nature reserve. So it's got a long-term plan. Shall we explain the costs of the restoration for 2 years and note ongoing costs? Yes, absolutely. So if you can explain where EOCA funding will be used and for what period of time. There's actually a question in the application about legacy, so it's really important to us that there is a good positive legacy for all of our projects. So if you can explain that you're going to remain in the area and how that work's going to continue in future years, that's all really useful to us.
Okay, next one. I was trying to decipher what the Spanish was there, but my Spanish is a bit rusty. I kind of got the gist, and then yeah, it's come through as a translation. So yeah, 30,000 euros. You can have a project for 1 year that's 30,000 euros. That's absolutely fine.
Okay, so a question about the public vote. If you're a small organisation, would you have a chance of succeeding over larger organisations? Absolutely. The organisations that have won the vote over the years have been small, they've been large. A whole range of different organisations have won. Sometimes smaller organisations are more sort of flexible and able to react more quickly and to gain votes and supporters. So over the years, it absolutely hasn't made a difference, the size of the organisation. Yeah, okay, that's just more details about the project.
So there's a question about wilderness areas. Yeah, we do like projects to be set in a wild area as possible. We do sometimes get ones that are fairly close to conurbations, but certainly we don't fund ones that are within conurbations. It's dependent from project to project and what you're looking at. But if you have a fairly wild area that's pretty close to a city, that would still be fine so long as it is reasonably wild, that it is a natural area and it's not like a park that's within the city or that sort of confine.
This is a long question here.
So when you're saying applying for a sanctuary related project, if the sanctuary's in a wild area and you're doing any restoration, any protection of wildlife, then yes, you can apply for a sanctuary area. If that area isn't actually visited by any outdoor enthusiasts, then that would be more of an issue. Is it okay for the project to begin prior to the approval of the application? Well, it's okay if you're funding the project by other means prior to the application and it's an ongoing project, and then you have a specific area that you're wanting EOCA to fund. You wouldn't be able to start funding a project that you're kind of saying is EOCA project without EOCA funding in place, if that's what your query is.
Going back to education, does this include education about plastic pollution in our waters? Yeah, we've had a number of projects over the years which has had the element of the hands-on element has been removing plastic pollution from outdoor habitats and spaces. And yes, absolutely, the education is about stopping the plastic getting there in the first place. So interviews, podcasts, events where you explain to people the impact of plastic pollution on habitats is an important part of that kind of project. So yeah, that would absolutely fit in the education criteria for a project.
Okay, we've got a query about does the grant recipient have to contribute their own funds to the project? No. We like to see other contributions into a project, but we don't, it's not always the case with our funding. So we do have organisations where part of the project, they sort of separate out a particular part, and that is EOCA funded, and the entire part of that project is EOCA funds, and there aren't any other inputs into it. But then we also have projects where EOCA is part of a much bigger project. Would the successful applicant be allowed to use funds generated from foreign exchange gains to further project impact? That's an unusual question.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure what you're meaning by that. You wouldn't be allowed to use EOCA funds to generate further funds by foreign exchange. So EOCA funds have to be specifically used for the conservation project that you've proposed. You wouldn't be able to sort of use it to try and garnish money on any exchanges. You can use EOCA funding to help gain match funding. So defining restoration in the specifics of so a census on a specific species, we would kind of class that as being research and not actually doing any kind of restoration. So if you do a census on a species and an area and assess the area for what the potential could be and how you can actually increase that species by doing certain things. So you would do the research first. We don't tend to fund solely research, so you would be able to put a bit of research into it, but we would need to know what you were looking at doing to try and improve that species in the area, and that would go through as restoration, but you would need to know what you were needing to do.
Yeah, and the anti-poaching actions would be considered restoration and hands-on. There's a question about if you're based in the US, but you're implementing a project in a different country, can you apply? Yes, absolutely. So we wouldn't fund projects actually taking place in the US or Canada because Conservation Alliance work there, but a not-for-profit can be registered or based in the US looking for funding for a project implemented in a different country. That's fine.
Right, we've had one in French here.
I'll leave that with you.
This is nice and testing. So you're got a project in an ecosystem in the south of Morocco, due to changing in the drying climate. Without having more detail as to what you were doing and what the ecosystem is needed, certainly an area like that is fine for applying to. You obviously you'd need to give more details as to what the threats are in that ecosystem and what you are proposing to do about it. But the location is absolutely fine.
And then there's a question about overheads and the fact that we will fund overheads linked to a particular project. Could we give examples? So yes, we would cover the salaries of people actually implementing the project that EOCA is funding, but not general salaries of an organisation. So yeah, you'd need to link the costs to the actual implementation of the project you're applying to EOCA for. So it wouldn't be sort of general office costs or insurance, for example, but anything linked to the project is fine.
Yep. So an ecosystem oasis is basically the area in Morocco. That's fine, but what we'd need to know is what the threats are and what you're going to be doing about it. The area would be fine for applying for a project.
We've got to the bottom of the list. Are there any more questions?
Anybody got any more questions they want to fire over?
So climate change mitigation. So this is about projects that act as sinks or stores of carbon. So projects that sequester carbon is what we're looking for there. So explain if you're working in a habitat that's particularly important, sink or store of carbon. That's what we mean there.
So would assets such as motor vehicles, where necessary, be an option to put in a budget? It's very much a case-by-case basis, and as to why you need something like that in your project and what the actual costs are in comparison to everything else in the budget. So EOCA has in the past funded like a boat motor, but that has been quite a small portion of the budget, so that you've always got to keep in mind that the main part of your project needs to be the hands-on conservation and doing the restorative work. If your entire budget was for the purchase of vehicles, it wouldn't go through. But we obviously do realise that there are certain circumstances in which vehicles can help implement a project and make the project successful.
How many project staff can be included? Again, I wouldn't say there's a limit. Again, we're looking for a good balance in an application. Some projects require a lot more people to be involved than others. So, yeah, there's no limit as far as we're concerned. It's what's a good number to implement the project well. That's what it all comes down to, really.
See, there's another French question, but Tanya's already replied. So yes, do feel free to send Tanya an email, and we can both have a look at that and answer for you. As Tanya's written in the chat, if there are any questions that you have after we sign off, please do feel free to send us an email on info@eocaconservation.org. No, you go.
If labour is the main cost of the project, is that a problem? No, some projects require a lot of cost to be put on for the individuals running the project and making it happen. So yeah, no, that's not a problem. Thank you for a nice comment. Great, we've got to the bottom again. Don't know if anybody's got any final questions. If not, you can always email us at info@eocaconservation.org if you've got any further questions. Great, okay, looks like everybody's happy, had their questions answered. We look forward to reading your applications then. Thank you very much for spending the time to join us today. That's great that you've done that. We hope it helps you with filling in your application forms.
And just notice somebody's asked about sharing the presentation. Yes, we will be looking at trying to share that. If we don't get it done today, we'll hopefully get it done tomorrow and get it shared.
Great. Okay. Right, if there's no final questions, we'll end the webinar. But thank you very much again for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Look forward to receiving your applications. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.